Cash for keys. It's when landlords offer tenants money to leave. The sky is not supposed to be the limit, but we found out it may as well be.
The horror stories we're hearing right now is that the tenants want an arm and a leg.
Tenants are demanding lots of money to go.
Tenants are just, again, using this newfound power they have to just get a few crumbs from landlords.
Landlords are crying foul.
It's causing complete chaos. It's like the Wild West.
Cash for keys. It's a growing battle in Canada's housing crisis. And for smaller landlords especially, the cost is, well, going through the roof.
What is it that's getting to you?
The stress, the unknown.
On a teacher's salary, Norma De Silva scrimped and saved to invest in 2 properties. She lives in one and rents out the other.
It was my very little nest egg. I wanted to retire this year, and I don't think that's going to happen. Like I said, the unknown, the uncertainty, it's crushing.
De Silva sold her rental property in August because with rising mortgage rates, she says she couldn't afford to finance it anymore. But her buyer can't move in because her tenant won't move out unless De Silva makes it worth his while.
What went through your mind when your tenant said, "We're not leaving"?
It was just unfathomable. Like, this is my property that I've worked so hard for, and it's like my property was held hostage.
De Silva's investment property is a condo in this West End neighborhood in Toronto. It's a gentrified area and rents aren't cheap. De Silva says her tenant, who moved in about a year and a half ago, doesn't want to move and feels entitled to ask for a lot of money to leave because he's assuming she's going to make a profit on the sale of her condo and can afford to pay up. Sounds outrageous, maybe even illegal? We were surprised to discover how many stories like that are out there.
We have some tenants who ask for $100,000, some tenants who are asking for the landlord to buy a plot of land for them. We have other tenants who are asking for the landlord to purchase a property for them.
It sounds ludicrous to ask a landlord for that amount of money.
It is.
Bita Delisi is a paralegal who is helping De Silva and many other small landlords get their cases heard at Ontario's Landlord and Tenant Board. Business is booming, and most of her new cases are cash for keys.
So what's in here?
So this cabinet alone is our hearing cabinet for 2024. This is January.
2024 for next year. These are the ones you're waiting.
This is all for next year.
Wow. So this has been a big increase.
Huge increase. Going back to 2020, where we almost had about 400 cash for keys cases, to this year alone, where we have almost 1,000 cases.
What's behind the increase?
The ripple effects of the interest rates. Oftentimes, landlords who purchase properties purchase them at the time with variable rates. And now that the rates have increased and the rents don't carry those expenses, landlords have no choice but to list and sell. Well, if you have a tenant who knows their rights and who knows that they don't have to leave because they have the right to remain in the unit until a hearing is held.
And that's the issue. Getting a hearing for an eviction order at the Landlord and Tenant Board can take months because of a backlog of tens of thousands of cases. Landlords complain a growing number of tenants are trying to cash in on those delays, and that's backing more landlords into corners.
We deal with a lot of small landlords, a lot of landlords that come to us in tears, a lot of small landlords that come to us with their keys and say, Bita, here are my keys, I can't do it anymore. There's huge, significant financial losses for some landlords, especially the smaller landlord.
Delisi and her team meet every week to update each other on their cases. They say tenants are not only demanding more, sometimes they're refusing to pay rent until they get what they want. Police, they say, can't do anything about it. Only the board can resolve disputes between landlords and tenants.
Like, I have landlords crying that I'm broke, the tenant owe me 60-something in rent, and I have to pay 2 mortgages, interest rates, renewal of the mortgages, and don't have a hearing date yet. It's up to 9 months right now.
What are some of the words that the landlords are using?
Extortion.
Extortion is the
Not
main
fair.
one.
Why should I pay them this money?
They ask us all the time, is this legal?
Fix the LTV.
The short answer, despite landlords' growing frustration, it is legal to negotiate a cash for keys deal. And while landlords call it fraud, the long delays at the board are giving tenants the upper hand. Tenant advocates say it's about time.
Any landlord complaining to me about the landlord and tenant board can go pound sand.
Jordy Dent is the executive director of the Federation of Metro Tenants Association.
There is absolutely more tenants that are using kind of this kind of landlord and tenant board delay because it's put a lot of landlords in a box. But again, that's not a bad thing from our perspective.
Dent says more people than ever struggle to pay skyrocketing rents and are fed up. Call it renter's revenge. On online forums, tenants encourage each other to get as much as they can from their landlords before handing over their keys.
Some people are asking for 6 figures. Others
Great.
are asking for a plot of land or a
Great.
down payment on a house.
Absolutely, that's wonderful.
Why do you think that's wonderful?
Because they have the right to do that. Look, a lot of these people, myself included, are paying tens of thousands of dollars for a place to live and a place to rent. When you pay that money, it doesn't just go into the ether. You get rights for that. Now, landlords have been using their rights to get a good deal for decades. Through the entire rental crisis that we're going through, landlords have been, opening the caviar and popping the champagne.
Dent says eviction fraud is the #1 complaint his group deals with. Tenants, he says, are often pushed out so landlords can jack up the rent or sell and make a profit. He has no sympathy for any landlord, big or small.
What do you say to the landlords who basically saved up their money to buy a property and whom now might lose that property? We're not talking to millionaires. What do you say to the mom and pop landlords who are suffering as a result of this?
I tell them to learn about investment risk. Okay, again, I don't really focus on the individual mom and pop landlords. I look at the overall market, okay? And if you look at the overall market today, landlords have never had it better. It is a golden age of profit, increased equities in their home, tax cuts and tax credits. They are living large right now. If you take a look at the tenant population, tenants are getting absolutely hammered. They're paying exorbitant rents, they're getting evicted left, right, and center, they can't enforce their rights. Again, that's the population that I mostly care about.
So your message to landlords then is suck it up. That's the risk that comes with an investment.
My message to landlords is welcome to what tenants have been living with for the last 2 decades. So yes, when a landlord has to struggle, who's in who's in far better condition than almost any tenant I know, yeah, I'm going to tell them to suck it up.
There's no official count of how many tenants are trying to leverage cash for keys deals or the damage it can cause. But choosing not to pay can be even riskier.
It's a three bedroom-ish, but I think...
Pema Zella is finally in her home, but she says she's lost tens of thousands of dollars even though she refused to pay her tenant to go.
I wasn't willing to pay even a penny for a person who is trying to scam, take advantage of the system, take advantage of people like us.
Zella and her family had rented out their home for a year, but when it was time for her daughter to start school nearby, she gave her tenant notice. He refused to leave and stop paying rent. While she waited months for a hearing, her tenant offered her a deal.
He said that, we can negotiate. I'm like, what do you mean we can negotiate? You already owe me more than $20,000. What do you mean? And he's like, pay me $50,000, I will get out next month. I had pain in my stomach. I was like, what? $50,000 and you will get out? How dare you even say that?
Because of those board delays, it took a year and a half for Zella to finally get an eviction order. But get this, when she came to deliver it, her tenant was not here, but a bunch of strangers were.
How many people were here when you came, with the eviction order?
1, 2, 3, 4.
4 people.
Yeah.
And no sign of your actual tenant.
No.
But these people had paid him rent.
Yes. Yeah. So those are the damage.
Besides the damages, by the time they finally got into their own house, Zella's tenant owed $40,000 in unpaid rent. And on top of that, she says, he made money off her property while she was going broke.
You didn't expect this to happen?
In Canada. And there's no accountability to the landlord, to the tenant like him, right? But we are suffering. Hardworking, honest citizen trying to survive in Canada. We're suffering for no apparent reason.
The inability of the landlord and tenant board to tackle this and to get on schedule is causing this like subculture of lawlessness.
De Silva's financial strain is only getting worse. She says she's spent tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees and paying her buyer's Airbnb costs until the sale closes in March. She's been hoping to get a hearing at the board to get her tenant out by then, or risks losing the sale.
I mean, I know the rights that tenants have, but when I think of how hard I've worked to create a responsible existence, and to have that pulled out from under me is hard to swallow. And someone else controlling that, you know?
So, Ioanna, there's so much more to this story, but can we talk about Norma De Silva for a moment? What's the latest with her?
Well, she finally got a hearing scheduled at the end of this month after 5 months of waiting. Now, if her case gets resolved in that single day, it still means that she might have to wait up until a month to get an eviction order and longer to get a sheriff to enforce it if her tenant doesn't leave willingly. So that's what she was looking at and decided she might be running out of time before her buyer bails. So she decided to settle with her tenant for an undisclosed amount. She said that's the terms of the agreement, that that number is confidential. So that's where she's at.
So as we talk about the landlord-tenant board, we're constantly referring to the delays. What's the status of those wait times now?
Well, there was a backlog of nearly 40,000 cases last spring, and we've tried to get an answer on what is the number of cases now in backlog, and we just haven't been able to get that information from the board. What it did tell us was that it has hired 60 new people, adjudicators, part-time and full-time, to help streamline and get cases heard more quickly, and that it has also streamlined their processes to help make that happen.
And, you know, you've given us some really strong personal experiences here, but if we step back, do you have a sense of how many smaller landlords might be in this situation?
We don't have a real sense because nobody is calculating it, but we do know from paralegals that their numbers have spiked. Another way to look at it is how many smaller landlords are out there. And according to a Statistics Canada report in 2020, about 8% of Canadians' households reported rental income, renting out an investment property or a basement suite in their primary home. And among those people, among the smaller landlords, that number has increased over the years because of lower interest rates, and people could afford to buy an investment property. Properties that people are now trying to offload because of the interest rates. And because of that, they're also looking for tenants. If they can't offload it, they're looking for tenants who can pay higher rent. So that's why the situation is so tricky for people who are in this boat.
But tricky too, because tenants are so vulnerable right now.
They totally are, and this cash for keys phenomena is simply a symptom of a broken housing of a broken housing system and a housing crisis. It's really hard for anybody to find an affordable place to live, and if your landlord wants you out, it is really hard to find somewhere else to go.
Ioanna Roumeliotis, thank you for doing this.
Thank you.